My name is Eleanor Hayes, though most folks call me Nora. I'm 67 years old, and 3 weeks ago a tornado ripped my house from the ground. 1 minute I was staring at the walls I'd lived inside for 40 years. The next I was holding nothing but a canvas bag and a family photo album, while the rest scattered across fields like confetti. With nowhere else to go, I drove to my son's apartment. I told myself family was the one place that couldn't close its doors. The steps were still wet with rain when I climbed them, my heart pounding harder than the storm itself. Trevor opened the door. His girlfriend stood just behind him, her hair damp, her tone rehearsed. "We need privacy right now," she said softly, but firmly. "It's not a good time." I waited for Trevor to speak, to correct her, to reach for me. He didn't. He only stood there, silent. The weight of that silence heavier than the wind that had ripped my roof away. I clutched my bag tighter and whispered something. Maybe I understand, though I didn't. When the lock slid behind me, I knew the real storm had just begun. The supermarket parking lot was almost empty that night, just a few trucks scattered under buzzing lamps. I pulled into the farthest corner, the kind of place no one looks twice. The engine ticked as it cooled, and I tried to believe it was only for a night. I tilted the seat back, draped my coat across my shoulders, and forced myself to imagine this was a road trip, not exile. But the silence pressed in. Every creak of the car echoed like the storm ripping through my roof again. A beat-up sedan circled past with teenagers laughing, music rattling their doors. For a moment I feared they'd stop, notice me hunched inside. They didn't. They sped on, leaving only the smell of exhaust. The world kept moving forward while mine had collapsed in minutes. The paper cup of coffee in my hand was already lukewarm. The waitress at the all-night diner had slipped me an extra sugar packet without saying a word. I tucked it in my bag as if it mattered, staring out the windshield. I thought of Trevor as a boy sleeping in the back seat on long drives, his head against the glass, breathing steady. That memory stung, him safe with me then, me unwanted by him now. I pressed my palm to my chest to steady the rhythm of my breath. The lot smelled faintly of gasoline and cut grass. Midnight settled heavy, the street lamp throwing pale light over the hood. I whispered to myself, just one more night. But the question circled anyway. Where do you go when even your own child's door stays closed? By morning, the car smelled of damp fabric and stale coffee. My back ached from twisting through the night, and my coat felt thin against the chill. I drove to the community center where the Red Cross had set up a relief station. The lot overflowed with minivans and pickups, families stepping out with blankets wrapped around their shoulders. Inside, the smell of disinfectant mixed with canned soup, and volunteers in red vests moved fast between tables stacked with cereal boxes and bottled water. A woman pressed a styrofoam cup of broth into my hands before I could speak. I swallowed too quickly, burning my tongue, but the warmth steadied me. When I asked about a bed, she shook her head. All full. Overflow's going to the motel off the highway. But that's filling, too. She scribbled a phone number on a slip of paper. Try the churches, some open basements. I nodded, clutching the paper though it felt like little more than ink. Families shuffled past, children clinging to stuffed animals, older couples holding each other close. Everyone had someone. I stepped outside alone. The sun was bright, almost cruel against the cracked asphalt. I sat on the hood of my car and finished the broth, watching volunteers wave cars through like parade marshals at an event no one wanted to attend. That evening, I drove back to the same corner of the supermarket lot. The street lamp flickered above me as if it might fail. I unfolded the slip of paper, stared at the numbers until they blurred, then folded it again. My phone was in reach, but I didn't call. I pulled the coat tighter, whispered again, "Just one more night." By the third night, the parking lot felt less like a place to hide and more like a cage. The silence grew heavier, broken only by the hum of the street lamp above. My body ached from curling in the seat, my coat no longer enough against the spring chill. The coffee stains on the console smelled bitter, a reminder of how quickly everything had unraveled. I turned on the radio for company, but static filled the car like sandpaper against my nerves. I shut it off and dropped my forehead against the steering wheel. My canvas bag sat on the passenger seat, the family album inside pressing down as if it carried the whole weight of my life. Out of habit. I scrolled through my phone. Trevor's number was still at the top. I tried again, hoping for something, anything, but it rang once and went to voicemail. I imagined him on the couch with Lila, watching a show, laughing. The resentment flared hot. How could love twist so fast into something sour? My thumb hovered, ready to give up, when I noticed a name I hadn't seen in years, Robert Whitaker. Rob. My first love. From high school days in Prairie Ridge. The boy who once patched a library chair with duct tape and grinned as if he'd saved the world. Our lives had split. He stayed. I left, but his name still glowed steady on the screen. I hesitated, pulse racing. It felt desperate, foolish, maybe selfish. Yet the thought of another night alone in this lot was worse. My throat tightened as though the decision itself could break me. Finally, I pressed the call button. The line rang 3 times. Then a voice, older but steady, came through. "Nora? Is that really you?" The sound filled me like a light flicking on in a dark house. I closed my eyes, whispering back, "Yes, it's me." The motel room was quiet except for the drip of the bathroom faucet. I had been awake most of the night, turning over the sound of Rob's voice in my mind, that steady tone I remembered from long ago. At exactly 9 o'clock, a knock came at the door. My heart jumped. When I opened it, Rob stood there. His hair was silver now, his shoulders broader, but the same easy steadiness lived in his eyes. He carried a canvas tote brimming with small things, socks, a toothbrush, a folded gray sweater, even a bar of lavender soap still in its wrapper. "You sounded cold," he said, stepping inside. His words were simple, but they pierced through the heaviness that had followed me since the storm. The room smelled faintly of mildew, yet with him in it, I could almost ignore it. He set the bag on the dresser, studying me with quiet concern. I let out a laugh, brittle at first, then softer. After a moment, he said, "Let's go see your place. I've got the truck." The drive back through town was silent, the roads lined with broken fences and roofs covered in blue tarps. People stood in yards sorting what little they could salvage, but none of it prepared me for the sight of my own street. Where my house had stood was only a cracked foundation, the slab split down the middle like a wound. Shards of glass and twisted metal caught the sunlight. I stepped onto the lot slowly, my shoes sinking into damp earth. Half buried near the porch steps lay a bent picture frame. Inside it was Trevor at 10 years old. Baseball glove too large for his hand, his smile frozen in time. My chest tightened, and my knees gave. Rob's hand caught my elbow before I fell. The wind rushed over the ruins. For the first time since the storm, I wasn't standing there alone. The insurance adjuster arrived in a white sedan with the company's logo on the side. He shook my hand briskly, clipped a badge to his vest, and began circling what was left of my lot. Rob stayed a few steps behind, arms folded, silent but steady. The adjuster snapped photos with a small digital camera, stretched his tape measure across the broken slab, jotted notes on a clipboard. His questions came flat and fast. the age of the furnace, the last time the roof was replaced, whether the siding had ever been updated. My answers felt like confessions. 30 years, 20 years, never. All the things I'd patched instead of replaced now lined up against me. Back at his car, he scrolled through forms on a tablet, his tone matter-of-fact. Given the condition and the age, your policy covers actual cash value. We deduct depreciation. After the deductible, payout comes to just under $90,000. The number landed like a stone in my chest. $90,000 for 40 years of living. I tried to steady my voice. That's not enough to rebuild. He glanced at me, indifferent. Not to replace. No. If you had a replacement cost policy, it would be different. But this contract is old. Actual cash value only. He tapped his stylus against the screen. Check should arrive in 10 business days. And with that, he packed up, drove off, leaving dust swirling behind him. I stood frozen, staring at the figure printed across the paper he'd left. Lumber prices had tripled. Labor costs the same. $90,000 wouldn't touch it. Rob placed a hand on my shoulder. You were underinsured, Nora. It happens to a lot of folks. It's not your fault. But shame rose hot anyway. I'd paid every premium, kept every receipt, trusted the policy to protect me. Yet when the storm ripped everything away, the safety net shredded beneath my feet, Rob's truck hummed along the 2-lane highway, fields stretching flat and endless beneath a pale evening sky. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, replaying the words of the adjuster. Actual cash value, depreciation, $90,000, like a bad song stuck on repeat. Each phrase tightened in my chest until I could hardly breathe. Rob cleared his throat. Nora, you don't need to spend another night out in that parking lot. I've got a spare room. It's not much, but it's warm and safe. You'd be doing me a favor by using it. His words warmed me and unsettled me at once. For decades I'd managed on my own, after my husband passed, through long nights of balancing bills, through raising Trevor with only grit and prayer. To suddenly lean on someone felt like surrendering the last piece of independence I still held. I can't just move in and let myself be taken care of, I said, staring at the horizon where the sun burned red against the fields. If I stay, I'll buy my own groceries. I'll help with the chores, and I won't be treated like a guest who overstays her welcome. Rob's lips tugged into a half smile. That sounds like the Nora I remember, stubborn as ever. But don't mistake this for charity. This is what people do when they care. We stopped at a roadside diner, its neon sign flickering above the windows. Rob filled the tank while I insisted on paying for supper. 2 bowls of soup, mashed potatoes, a slice of pie we split down the middle. Sliding the cash across the counter steadied me. I wasn't helpless. Back on the road, the miles blurred into shadow. When we finally pulled into his driveway, the house stood sturdy and well-kept, blue shutters glowing faintly in the dusk. He carried my bag inside, as though it weighed nothing. The air smelled of cedar and polish, a lived-in comfort. As I stepped across the threshold, something inside me steadied too. For the first time since the storm, I felt the ground beneath me might actually hold. Rob's house sat at the edge of Prairie Ridge, the kind of place built steady, with shutters painted blue and daisies crowding the fence. He showed me the spare room as if he'd been waiting to. The quilt lay folded at the foot of the bed. A lamp cast a warm circle of light, and on the dresser sat a vase of daffodils, so fresh they startled me. The days soon took on a rhythm. On Wednesdays, a housekeeper came by, and I worked beside her, dusting shelves and folding laundry so I never felt like I was being served. On Fridays, Rob made trips to the hardware store, and I tagged along. He'd repair a fence post or sand a step, and I carried nails, glad for work that left honest dirt beneath my fingernails. Evenings were the part of the day I began to look forward to. Rob grilled outside, humming tunes without words, while the smoke drifted into the twilight. We ate under the porch light, and afterward I sat at the kitchen table with my journal, writing in blue ink. I listed the details that kept me afloat: the smell of lemon polish, the sound of his boots on the porch, the daisies closing at dusk. One evening I reached into my bag and pulled out the sugar packet I had carried since that first diner. I tore it open and stirred it into my tea, watching the crystals vanish like frost under morning sun. The taste was sweeter than expected, almost like grace, a reminder that even small kindnesses could carry me through. Rob looked across the table, meeting my eyes. "Feels good not to eat alone," he said simply. I nodded, warmth loosening the knot in my chest. For weeks I had lived as if survival was all I could manage. But here, in this house with its cedar scent and steady routines, I felt something change. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was beginning, slowly but surely, to belong. Saturday afternoon, my phone lit up with Trevor's name. For a moment, I simply stared, thumb hovering above the screen, my pulse racing. Part of me longed to hear his voice, to believe he was calling out of pure concern. I pressed accept, steadying my breath. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than I expected. "I was just wondering how you're holding up. Are you safe? Do you have somewhere decent to stay?" I closed my eyes. That gentleness was what I'd been waiting for since the night he shut the door. "I'm all right," I told him carefully. "I've got a roof, thanks to an old friend." There was a pause. Too long. The silence of someone weighing his next move. Then his tone shifted, tighter. "So, have you heard back from the insurance company yet? Did they give you a number?" I sat straighter in the chair, heat rising in my chest. I thought of standing in his hallway while Lila told me they needed privacy, and how he had said nothing. Now his first true question was about money. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice even, "but that's not something we're going to discuss over the phone." He cleared his throat. "I just think maybe we should plan together. I mean, rebuilding, downsizing, there are options." I cut in gently but firmly. "Trevor, if what you want is to talk about finances, this call ends here. But if what you want is to see how I'm really doing, then come to dinner tomorrow. 6 o'clock. Bring Lila if you'd like. Rob will be grilling in the yard." He hesitated, caught off balance. "Dinner. Yes, around a table, like family ought to." The line went quiet except for his breathing. Finally, he said, "All right, we'll come." When I set the phone down, my hands were trembling, but not with fear. It was the tremor of resolve, of taking back the choice of how and when this conversation would happen. Rob came in from the garden, dirt on his palms, the scent of fresh-cut grass following him. "Everything okay?" "Trevor's coming tomorrow," I said, my voice steady. It's time he heard the truth from me. Rob didn't press. He only nodded, the kind of nod that said he understood the weight of what was coming. Sunday evening. The backyard smelled of charcoal and rosemary. Rob stood at the grill, turning chicken breasts and corn on the cob, the smoke curling into the warm air. I laid out plates and glasses on the wooden table, steadying each one with care. By the time Trevor's car pulled into the drive, the sky was streaked orange with sunset. He walked across the grass with Lila at his side. His smile was polite, practiced, but his eyes moved quickly, over the house, the yard, the truck parked near the fence. Lila carried a small store-bought pie, her lips pressed tight in a line. We sat down, the clink of forks and scrape of chairs filling the silence. For a few minutes it almost felt ordinary, passing the butter, pouring tea. Rob asking if they wanted more corn. Then Trevor leaned forward. "So, Mom," he said, clearing his throat, "about the insurance. 90,000 isn't much, but maybe we could figure out the best way to use it, rebuild smaller, maybe invest." I set down my fork. My hands no longer shook. "Trevor, listen carefully. The money is mine to handle. What I need from you isn't advice about policies or investments. What I need is for you to ask if I'm sleeping at night, if I'm eating, if I'm all right. Because when I knocked on your door after losing everything, your silence hurt worse than the storm itself." His mouth opened, then closed. Lila shifted in her seat, her gaze falling to her lap. Rob stayed quiet, only watching, giving me the floor. I continued, softer but firm. "If you came here tonight for money, this dinner ends now. But if you came because you still care about your mother, then stay, eat, and maybe we can begin again." The yard went still except for the hiss of the grill cooling. Trevor's face flushed, shame and anger flickering across it. Finally, he let out a breath. "You're right. I should have asked about you first." It wasn't a full apology. Not yet. But it was a crack in the wall, and I slid the pie plate toward him. "Then have some dessert. We'll talk about the rest another time." The first star appeared overhead as we passed the plates again. Something had shifted, not fixed, not healed, but changed. 6 months later, I signed the lease on a cottage at the far edge of Prairie Ridge. The shutters needed paint. The linoleum in the kitchen curled at the corners, and the garden was overrun with weeds. But it was mine. I paid the deposit with part of the insurance check and filled the rooms with secondhand furniture chosen carefully, piece by piece. Each chair, each lamp carried a weight of choice. For the first time since the storm, I felt the ground beneath my feet was solid again. Trevor drove out one Saturday with a toolbox in the back of his car. He didn't mention money. Instead, he replaced the broken hinge on my back door, his shirt collar damp with sweat. When he finished, he lingered, looking around at the cottage as if unsure what to say. Then he hugged me, longer than he had in years. It wasn't an apology in words, but something had shifted between us, a crack in the wall he had built, not healed, but not hopeless either. Rob came by often, never empty-handed, sometimes with tomatoes from his garden, sometimes with nothing more than time. We grilled in the evenings, pulled weeds side by side, and sat on the porch watching the light fade across the fields. He never treated me like a burden, never made me feel fragile. With him, I wasn't the widow who had lost everything or the mother left out in the cold. I was simply myself. And that was enough. One evening, I brewed coffee in my small kitchen and reached for the last sugar packet I had carried since that night in the diner. I tore it open and stirred it into the steaming cup. The granules vanished instantly, leaving only sweetness. I smiled, realizing I had carried that little packet through the worst of it, through the parking lot nights, through shame and fear and silence. Now it was gone. But what it had represented remained, a reminder that even the smallest things can steady you until you find your footing again. The tornado had taken my house, but it had not taken my dignity. Losing everything had forced me to draw lines I should have drawn long ago. It had taught me that boundaries are not walls to shut people out, but foundations to build a steadier home. As the sun dipped behind the cottage, throwing gold across the wildflowers by the fence, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Home, I realized, isn't just the walls that shelter you. Home is the strength you claim within them. And this time, I would not let anyone take that from me again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, Please subscribe and join me for more every day.